What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the podcast. This is Real Talk with Zuby, back with another hard-hitting episode, real honest conversations about interesting stuff, always bringing fascinating guests to the show. Today, we've got on a young lady. Her name is Meghan Murphy. She's from Canada. She is an independent writer, journalist, and the founder of the website Feminist Current. Welcome to the show, Meghan Murphy. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for waiting for me.
That's okay. We're being patient here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm blessed. I'm blessed. I'm good. I'm always good. I try to always be happy. I'm not someone who gets down and stays down for too long. So
Yeah.
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 So Megan, a lot of people have been asking me to talk to you on the show. A lot of people saw what happened with you, with Twitter and the banning and all that stuff, which we're all going to get into. But first of all, let's start from the top. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and let people know a little bit more about you and what you do?
So as you mentioned, I'm Meghan Murphy. I live in Vancouver. I was born in Vancouver. I've lived here my whole life. I've been running Feminist Current, which is Canada's leading feminist website. It's probably one of the only radical feminist feminist websites of its nature in the world, I would say. I also do a podcast. I have a master's degree in gender, sexuality, and women's studies. And are you laughing?
I'm
I was like, what are you smiling about?
I'm smiling. There's a difference.
I have a BA in women's studies, and I'm an independent writer. So I've published in lots of places around the world, in North America, and I was recently banned from Twitter for understanding how biology works.
Wow. Yeah, we live in strange times. So there's a lot of stuff there that I want to touch on. But first of all, what is a radical feminist? What does that actually mean?
So I guess to be clear, I don't actually identify as a radical feminist. I identify as a feminist. Other people identify me as a radical feminist, and that's fine. It doesn't bother me. I don't think that the term itself is bad. I just, what I believe, I feel like that fits within basic feminism. So I advocate against male violence against women. I want to challenge the oppression and exploitation and objectification and sexualization of women. I want to challenge what I consider to be sexist or regressive roles that are imposed on women. But yeah, the main thing is the violence issue. So most of my work has focused on issues like prostitution, pornography, domestic abuse, and then lately I've really been forced to focus pretty heavily on this issue of gender identity ideology or transgenderism, gender identity legislation, whatever you want to call it. Because I think that it's incoherent and harmful in general. And I don't think that we should be making incoherent arguments. I think we should be making good arguments that make sense. But also, it's an ideology and it's legislation that I think is really harmful to women and girls in particular.
And that last part certainly there is, well, to be honest, a lot of what you said there. I mean, I'm certainly against violence against women. Hopefully that's not something I explicitly need to say. But that last point you brought on there, I mean, it's very funny. I don't know if you saw the viral video and media attention I've been getting recently from the deadlift video. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
It seems like, yeah, I guess you got a lot of like attention from radical feminists all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's been yeah, I've been getting attention from all sorts of people all across the spectrum. So it's been a pretty bizarre 2 weeks. It's not a conversation I necessarily thought I would find myself embroiled in, and having people trying to, TV stations and radio stations wanting to interview me to talk about this topic, and I'm just kind of like, wow, this is not it's not what I set out to do, but here we are. So from your own perspective, in terms of that ideology and the dangers to women, I mean, that's something that I recognized and was actually trying to sort of display in that video. It's like, look, there is a clear biological difference, especially when you're talking about sport, you're talking about strength, you're talking about speed. These are things that we've known for thousands of years. It's not some, it's just reality. And so there is a reason why you separate male and female changing rooms and sport leagues and all that kind of stuff. Like, to be honest, and prisons, I mean, the way I look at it is, yeah, this whole ideology, that whole idea, it's going to be a lot more harmful to women than it is to men, realistically, because it's not going to be happening the other way around. You're not going to have biological women competing against men's sports and dominating them. That's not going to happen. But there's no reason why it could not and will not happen the other way around. And you're already seeing that happening. And just in terms of general fairness, that is very clearly a problem. I mean, that's my own perspective on it. What is it? How is it that you see it as, I guess, a threat to women? Is there something beyond that scope, perhaps?
Well, I mean, yeah, the sports thing is a really big one because it just is so obvious all of a sudden to people who maybe haven't been paying attention to this. You know, this debate around gender identity is relatively new. It's a new trend, but feminists have been pushing back against this idea for at least a few years now. But all of a sudden, it's like when you're faced with the reality of this big, tall man standing next to smaller women, like holding a medal or whatever, people are like, wait, no. Like, is this real? Like, what is happening? And, you know, like, it's so strange and frustrating to all of a sudden having to argue about these things that are so obvious that everyone already knows, that we shouldn't even have to explain. Like, there is a difference between men and women. Males and females are real. Males and females have existed for all of human history. They exist in the animal kingdom. You know, this is how babies are made. This is how reproduction works. And, you know, women and men's bodies are different. You know, like, whether we like it or not, men are in general stronger and bigger than women. And there's other differences too. Like, there's all sorts of differences that people, I don't know, are just kind of pretending away for some reason that I don't understand. You know, like, men's bones are different. Men's organs are different. You know, men have bigger hands, longer limbs. Like, you know, I'm faced with, I've been pretty heavily engaged with this debate. So I've been doing, you know, speaking gigs and events and debates and stuff like that. And people stand up and they say, well, what is a man? What is a woman? Like, who can say? Who really knows? It's so nuanced and complicated. And it's like, it's not nuanced and complicated. Like,
It's really strange. It's when people try to over intellectualize absolutely everything to the stage where you just completely lose sight of what reality is, right? If you have to go back and ask, what is a man? What is a woman? Who defines it? And it's just like, it might be a fun intellectual exercise, but if you're going to start putting this stuff into real life and putting it into legislation, then it's kind of like, wait, hang on here. No, we already, you know, I've got a, you know, like, little nieces and nephews who are, you know, 2 years old, and they know the difference, and everyone knows the difference. So it's like, wait, why are we going to suddenly forget about objective reality and, you know, just try to apply this thing on a level where it doesn't make sense. It's very bizarre. I mean, it's something that I saw coming initially, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It's something that kind of came on my radar, and I have been thinking for years, well, why wouldn't men, especially knowing how badly professional athletes want to win and knowing the lengths they're willing to go through, I was like, well, according to these rules, surely I or any other guy could just say we're a woman and just do stuff. So It's
Yeah, I
funny
mean,
because
why not? Like, it's not like there's not power and glory and even money to be accessed from being a top athlete, right? And so,
yeah, because some people on the sorry, I've had some people on the other side of the debate say, "Oh no, but nobody would do that. No one would." And I'm like, I don't think you understand athlete mentality. If I'm a professional sprinter and I keep coming in eighth or ninth place, and that's continually happening, so I'm really really good, but I'm not the best who's going to get that big multi-million-dollar sponsorship deal, then why wouldn't I just perhaps suppress my testosterone for 1 year? Literally, I think it's only 12 months you need to do it, and
mhm.
then just go wipe the floor with the women. It's like it's I mean, the women's sprinting records can be beaten by high school aged boys. And
Yeah, and
that's
that's yeah, scholarships are in question then too. Like,
yeah.
girls are actually now losing out on access to scholarships because there's these boys who are claiming to be women and beating them in track.
Yeah, it's just wrong. I don't It's very odd. I mean, the way people who would be opposing what we're saying always try to frame it like what we're saying is based in some kind of hatred of a group or of an individual, or they always try to apply some kind of malice to it. And I'm just like, no, the malice is the other way around. You're the ones who are trying to completely, I mean, taken to a logical conclusion, it would just eliminate women in sport. It would just completely
For sure.
it would just wipe it out. So I'm just kind of like, well, surely that's not, if you've got you're trying to avoid her harming, you're trying to avoid harming maybe like a handful of people's feelings, to rather than just the threat of destroying this entire thing. It's very odd to me.
Yeah,
I don't know if you checked out the podcast. I spoke to Posey Parker about this
I
yesterday.
haven't had a
And
chance to watch it yet, but yeah, I
okay,
did. Yeah.
yeah, she had some very strong feelings about it. So
Mhm.
following on from this topic, I mean, you've obviously had different reactions to the position that you've taken on it and some of the things that you've said. So to the point where you're now an outcast from Twitter. You've been exiled from Twitter. So tell us a little bit more about what happened there.
Yeah, so I mean, I had been on Twitter since like 2011, so a long time. I'd never really had any issues on Twitter. Um, I've been making these arguments against gender identity for like a few years now, and suddenly last year my account just started getting kind of locked down over and over and over and over again. And it would be for what I considered to be fairly innocuous tweets, like it wasn't harassing anyone. It definitely wasn't saying anything violent. It wasn't using slurs or anything like that. Um, One of the tweets that my account got locked down for was just for saying men aren't women. That was the entire tweet. It was in context, like it was part of a larger conversation, but it wasn't directly aimed at any particular person. It wasn't aimed at a trans identified person, even. I was just saying men aren't women. Um,
How dare you?
and yeah, and did you say you can't hear me?
Oh no, sorry. I said how dare
Okay.
I? Sorry,
Oh, how dare
I
me.
said how dare you? Yeah.
Sorry, there was a noise outside and I think it can be out. Anyway, so yeah, and so they locked my account down. They forced me to delete that tweet. Like I came back on and I was super mad and I was like, what is going on? Because like they locked down your account and they just send you this message saying you violated a policy or you it's something about hateful conduct, but they don't say specifically what rule you broke or anything. So I had no idea. I mean, saying men aren't women to me doesn't, there's no obvious rule that would be breaking. At that time, there was no rule in place around what they call misgendering. I don't agree with that idea because I don't think it's possible. I'm correctly sexing people. I'm not misgendering people. That word doesn't make sense.
Mm.
But that wasn't a rule that was in place anyway. So I'm like, what's happening? I'm just sort of being arbitrarily shut down. I came back on and responded to Twitter being like, like what I know I'm not supposed to swear on your show, but I did
Yeah.
swear.
What the heck?
Yeah, what the heck? I have a bit of a potty mouth, so I'll try to keep that under control. But I was like, what's up? Like, I can't state basic facts on Twitter, basically. And then they shut me down again.
What was
And
the second one for?
Well, I complained about being shut down, and I included a screenshot of the tweet that I had been locked out for, because I was like,
Okay.
what is happening? This is all I said. Like, what's going on, Twitter? Like, I was asking Twitter. I'm like, I'm not allowed to state facts on your platform anymore. What am I doing wrong? And then finally, I was suspended permanently. I was completely shocked. Oh, they took away my just before they suspended me permanently, they took away my blue check mark.
Oh no!
Like,
not the blue check. No, not the blue check.
Petty.
No.
I was like, oh, this is so childish. It's like, fine, you can't have your blue check anymore. It's like, oh
no,
I'm not me, because all the blue check mark is just to verify that you are who you say you are, so that people can't impersonate you if you're like a public figure or whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm not Meghan Murphy anymore. Like, is that my punishment? Like, who knows who you are? You might be anyone. Obviously, it's a status symbol that they're taking away. But and then later that night, on Friday night, I was at the bar with a friend. It was like 10 or 10:30, and all of a sudden I get this email from Twitter. I don't know, I guess they had nothing better to do on a Friday night than pick on me. But saying they'd suspended my account permanently, and it was for a tweet. This is sort of like a complicated story, if you want me to explain it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so there was this guy here in Vancouver who was going around to local estheticians and asking them to give him a Brazilian bikini wax. And when they would decline and say, sorry, we only offer this service to women, he tried to sue a bunch of them. He tried to take a bunch of them to human rights court and say that they were discriminating against him because apparently he was transgender.
Is this someone who was literally just in every sense of the word a man? Had they even done anything?
I mean, I can't say for sure, but
Okay.
I mean, he looks like a man. He was still and still is identifying himself as male on social media. Like, he still uses his male name. He sometimes also uses a female name, but even on Twitter, his name was, he used both names.
Okay.
And then in places like LinkedIn and on Facebook, he was still using his male name. He was leaving reviews online, like on Yelp and places like that, under his male name with his face that looks like a man. Like, there's some photos of him online now that, like, he's wearing makeup and stuff like that. He's got selfies of himself in women's washrooms. Like, you can see all these women behind him, and he's taking a selfie in the mirror, and he has like some makeup on. But, yeah, as far as I know, he's not done, full surgery or anything. But who knows? I can't guarantee that. So he had been in the media because of these court cases.
Sorry, Meghan, we're catching your hands every time you do that.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I'll try not to move. I do get like that, so I'll try not to. Yeah, so he'd been in the media, but they've been keeping him anonymous. So they've just been using his initials. And meanwhile, the women that he was taking to court, they were using those women's names in the media. So they weren't allowed to be anonymous, but he was allowed to be anonymous for whatever reason. Like, very kind and generous of the media to keep this, dude who was potentially predatory anonymous. A blogger discovered his real identity, wrote a big blog post about it, outed him. And so I posted a link to that blog post and said, is it true that blah, I used his initials, is actually so-and-so, and included his Twitter handle, which this blogger had, revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And I found, or someone sent me a screenshot of one of his reviews for one of these estheticians, I guess, saying like, so-and-so did a great job on my Brazilian bikini wax, with his male name and his man face. Like, he posted this publicly. I wasn't revealing anything. This was online for anyone to see. So I posted a screenshot of that and responding to myself. So confirming, I was like, oh yeah, like, this was proof that this is this guy, like, this is his actual identity. And that's what they suspended my account for finally. So, I tweeted information that was already out there in the public sphere. And, I said, yeah, it's him. So I'm not sure I appealed all this and didn't get any detailed response. They just said, sorry, you violated Twitter rules. They don't say what rules. They use this hateful conduct thing again. Sorry, I'm moving my hands around again.
It's okay to move them. It's just when they hit something because the sound comes through.
Oh, my nails. So yeah, like, essentially, I mean, I feel like I was banned because of who I am and because I'm a person who's been really critical of gender identity ideology, and I get a lot of traction and I have a really big following. Like, I think when I got kicked off, I had close to, 25,000 followers on Twitter, and I think there were just I can only guess, really, because again, they've not been accountable at all, and they've not responded to my questions and my requests to explain to me what rules I violated exactly. But this guy obviously didn't want me tweeting about him, and I think there were probably people at Twitter who were not liking what I had to say, so they just shut me down. And and it has a really big impact. I mean, I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong in general for Twitter to be shutting people down for political and ideological reasons and arbitrarily, and not following their own rules and not following their own protocol and breaching their own contract in terms of their terms of service. But, I'm an independent writer and a journalist. Like, I don't work for a company. Like, this has a real impact on my ability to work and my ability to make a living. My ability to connect with other writers, to connect with sources, to connect with other editors, to share my work, obviously, to promote events, and just to speak. I mean, Twitter, people might say, oh, it's just social media, but social media is everything today. We do everything on social media.
Yeah, I mean, if you work in media or you're someone with something to promote or you're an entertainer or anything like that, then it is a big deal. It is a very big deal, especially when you know that you haven't done something wrong or actually violated the terms and conditions. I mean, it's crazy because it's very obviously ideological. I mean, it's not even I don't even think that's debatable. And it's very odd because, as someone who spends a lot of time on Twitter, I mean, I see some of the stuff that is posted on there, oftentimes by people with blue check marks. I have literally seen people advocating violence. I've seen people calling for other people to get doxxed. I've seen people saying some, genuinely awful stuff. I'm not even saying that they should necessarily be banned, but some of the stuff I've seen on there, I've seen some stuff that borders on criminal. And it's from high profile accounts as well. So it's kind of like, wait, hang on here.
Yeah, I mean, people have said horrible, disgusting things to me on Twitter, and Twitter's not done anything about it. And like, I mean, there's accounts on Twitter that post graphic pornography.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh
there's
gosh.
actual porn accounts.
Yeah.
And there's one account, I think it's called LA, what is it called? Like LA Models or something like that. It's a pretty big account. Yeah, I'm glad I got the handle wrong, so I can't actually send people there. So, but it's a pretty big account. It's a porn account. It's a porn company, and their entire feed is graphic pornography. And recently, they were accused of being engaged in sex trafficking. So there's like actual companies, like, and you're doing illegal things on their platform that they're not shutting them down for. Never mind all this violence and like, really overt, like not subtle violence, overt, like you should be killed, you should be raped in, more grotesque ways that I'm not going to go into detail. But like, and, I'm shut down because I'm, literally just posting facts that are out on the internet to see. And even if I weren't doing that, even if, like, of course I'm also disagreeing with this particular ideology and challenging it.
As 98% of the entire world probably does.
Exactly. I mean, my opinion that males and females exist is a majority opinion.
It's not an opinion. It's a fact. It's an objective reality. Like, let's be clear.
Even to talk about this as ideological, like to say, oh, Twitter shut me down for political reasons or for ideological reasons, they did. But yeah, like I'm literally stating material reality and a reality that everybody knows and agrees with. Like it's so crazy.
So where's this all come from?
You know what? I don't know. Like, I think that it comes, I mean, I've obviously thought about this a lot. I'm like, how did this happen? Like, how did we get to this place where we're pretending as though a man can really be a woman on the inside. What does that mean? That it's possible to change sex, that a man should just be able to identify as a woman one day and then be allowed to enter into women and girls change rooms or win powerlifting competitions. Congratulations, by
Thank
the way.
you. Thank you. I'm back to being a man now. I'm only female. I only identify as female when lifting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
I'm gender
nice.
fluid.
Yeah, you're so open-minded and flexible.
Yeah.
Ready for the modern world.
2019.
And yeah, and like, so I think that I mean, because it's weird how much power these activists have, right? Like this is a very small minority of people. And like you said, like it's a small minority of people who believe this, but these trans activists are a very small minority. And somehow they've managed to very, very quickly start changing laws, like not just pushing this ideology forward and convincing people that there's such a thing as a man who's actually a woman or who can change sex, blah, blah, blah. But that, these policies and laws are being passed really quickly around the world in terms of being able to just self-identify. All these sports bodies are adopting these policies that say, as you mentioned, the only rule for most of these bodies now who are adopting these gender identity policies is that you have lower testosterone levels for a year. But I mean, that doesn't make you not male. That doesn't change your bones. Like that doesn't actually change your physical body to such an extent that you're no longer male and that you're now female. I mean, ridiculous, right?
No. In fact, interestingly, I mean, it can actually preserve the bone density because estrogen increases and preserves bone density. So if you're biologically a man, it could actually sort of harden your bones and your skeleton, which in certain sports may actually give you an advantage, especially in combat or contact stuff.
Crazy. And yeah, I think a lot of it comes from academia. Like I think a lot of it comes from gender studies. I think it comes out of this kind of postmodernism that has very much taken over gender studies. Now what used to be women's studies 20 years ago, that's not what gender studies is today. It's this weird postmodern academic, like jargon filled, meaningless kind of thing that convinces people that you can kind of subvert reality, if that makes any sense. Like that you can sort of alter reality just by framing things in a different way or through language. If you use different language, then things change or cease to exist, or you can alter reality in that way.
And it kind of works, which is the annoying thing. I mean, we've kind of seen it happen and continue to keep happening to the point where
words no longer have meaning anymore. I mean, these like gender studies students seem to have taken words like violence and abuse and harassment and trauma and use them in ways that don't have anything to do with violence or abuse or harassment or trauma. It's like if you disagree with somebody, that's framed as violence or abuse or harassment.
Yeah. I've been using that one on anyone who's critical of my deadlift video. I've told them that they're transphobic bigots, they're being sexist, racist, and transphobic, and they are committing acts of violence against me by denying my lived experience.
Right. They're not being intersectional. Did you tell them that? You should tell them they're not being intersectional.
Yeah, they're messing up. So, I mean, that's why it's been quite a fun couple of weeks because, anyone who does criticize it, I can literally just be like, well, what is your evidence that I did not actually legitimately identify as a woman when I lifted that weight? And then, if they start questioning, they'll say, oh, you're not being genuine. He's not really trans. I'm like, well, first of all, you just misgendered me. And secondly, you don't know me and, you're making all these assumptions. How would you like it if I made all these assumptions about you? And then they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because they're like, this guy he understands my ideology too well. But it's like,
Yeah, well, it's
well,
too easy to use those arguments against them. Like, it's
yeah,
like, okay, I'm not, like, if I say that I'm trans or I say I'm a woman and you say, oh, you don't really mean it, it's like, well, who really means it? Like, what does it mean? If you're going to argue that this is based only on self-identification and nothing else, not surgery, not hormones, not that I think that it's possible to change your sex through surgery and hormones, but we're not even using that as a measure, right? So
yeah.
it's like, yeah, no, literally the argument you're making is that anybody should be able to announce that they are what the fuck ever. Sorry. And
It's okay. It's okay. For the iTunes version,
I'm doing
I
my
can bleep it.
best. And and that everyone just has to accept that without questions, and that if you ask questions, you're a hateful bigot and you're, guilty of hate speech and maybe even a hate crime.
Mm-hmm. And what is the actual? I mean, I'm in the UK where things are getting a little bit swirly out here at the moment. Um, they've got police literally. They've got entire police divisions that are just trying to find mean tweets on Twitter and mean posts on Facebook that do not violate the law, but just might potentially be offensive. And they're actually kind of knocking on people's doors and giving them rings to, in quote unquote, someone was actually told to literally check their thinking. That's what the police
Oh
officer said.
my God.
You might
So
want to
creepy.
you might want to check your thinking. I was like, wow, that is 1984. This is Airstrip One.
Literally.
Yeah, and you're in Canada, and I know that Canada has gotten a bit weird with this stuff too. So what's the situation there in terms of the legality? Because you can now just change your you can change your legal gender just based on self-identification, right? And you've also got this bill C-16, which I know
Yeah.
you and several other people, including Jordan Peterson, Gad Saad, a lot of people complained about. So talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that more people had complained about it, to be honest, because I mean, they pushed through this legislation really quickly, so there wasn't much opportunity to push back. But I mean, I think Canadians are too polite. Like, in the UK, there's been a lot more pushback around gender identity ideology and legislation, especially from feminists over there. They've been fighting. They've been, trying to reach their politicians. They've been holding meetings and events. They've been speaking out. And in Canada, we were a little too slow on the uptake. So this legislation, Bill C-16, passed almost without any pushback. I mean, I went to the Senate to speak against it, as did, as you said, Jordan Peterson and a few other people. But I mean, beyond that legislation, so yeah, people can change their IDs quite easily, to say
Okay,
they're the opposite sex.
what does it actually require? What do you have to do? Just fill
I
out a form?
believe that you still need a doctor's note, but it's not hard to get that note. I mean, and I think it's not even just doctors. I think nurse practitioners, your psychologists, things like that, can just
Okay.
write you a note and kind of vouch for you and say, yeah, like, this person is who they say they are. They're a woman.
Yeah.
And I mean, considering that you're supposed to accept if someone announces they're a woman and you can't ask questions, and that it has nothing to do with surgery or hormones or any other requirement, I can't imagine that many people in this climate would be bold enough to reject that identity. And beyond that, I mean, the policies that are being adopted by public institutions, so schools, community centers, city run institutions and things like that, they just passed policies that said, yeah, anyone can come into this change room if they want. And that has nothing to do with, I mean, they didn't consult the public about that at all, but that's even regardless of any law. I mean, they've just decided that because they want to be accepting and inclusive and open-minded. Like, we're so into being inclusive and open-minded and using all these buzzwords like diversity, intersectionality, all these things, and supporting marginalized communities and blah, blah. Not that there's anything wrong with supporting marginalized communities, but now it's just like, you just announce that you're marginalized because you have this, because you're non-binary or you're trans for whatever reason, and we should support you because you're a victim.
Yeah, well, I mean,
something.
there are all these bigoted women who don't want me and my penis in their bathroom, which I think is that's marginalizing me, and it's certainly discriminatory. So I might
we're
need to go in
abusing
there
you.
I might need to go in there and start spinning it around in there, and just if anyone says anything,
But exactly. I mean, that's what they're saying is okay. You know, like it's like, oh, nobody can say anything. Like
and it is
how are we
happening.
the wrong ones for
Yeah,
not wanting like grown men in change rooms with women and girls? Like ridiculous.
yeah, and this is actually happening. This is no longer theoretical. This is actually happening. I was reading a story about a man in I can't remember what state in the US, but he was in the women's changing room or in the shower, just there like butt naked. And obviously tons of women reported it because, you know, some people were there were little girls and stuff like that. And then the police actually couldn't prosecute them or anything because according to that state law, you are allowed to use the changing room as whatever gender you identify as. So the guy just remained adamant that he did identify as a woman, and it's kind of like, well, case closed. You can't take this thing any further now. It's weird. Sometimes it's like we've just suspended. Not we. It's like a fraction of society has just suspended reality, and there's just this climate of fear and concern about telling the truth,
Mm-hmm.
which is not, and the fear is not unsubstantiated either. I mean, you've faced some of the repercussions of that. You said a man is not a woman though, and you've now had your life affected by that, and you're not the only person. I've seen a whole bunch of different stories of people literally stating objective facts, truths, not even opinions or things that are offensive, and facing repercussions from it, whether that's getting doxxed or having a mob attack them or their families being harassed. It is a real situation. Some people think that it's alarmist or it's being overblown, but I just think it's because it hasn't reached them yet, so they haven't
Mm-hmm.
kind of seen it really manifest. Sometimes I think, sometimes I think it just needs to go to a level where it's so in people's faces that it's just like, okay, we need to actually act on this. But
Right. And that's
one,
what's happening. And it's like,
hmm,
so sorry to interrupt. I mean,
yeah,
it's frustrating because I think that we sort of, you know, I think that a lot of feminists who are following this issue and engaged with this issue did kind of see this coming. We're like, no, this is really going to happen if we keep going with this. And now it is happening. And people are like, oh, wait, like the sports thing is kind of really in people's faces. But, you know, like I know women who've been fired from their jobs for
oh really?
talking about this. Yeah. And recently, Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter, which is Canada's longest standing rape crisis center and transition house in Canada, lost, I think it was about $30,000 grant at the city just last week because some trans activists complained to the city and because they won't let men into the transition house. You know, this is a place where women go to escape really
Hmm.
horrific violence and to be safe and try to heal and recover. So it's women only. It's always been women only. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not that I don't think that there shouldn't be services for trans identified people or for men. I
Yeah.
think those totally are needed, those kinds of services. But I also think it's okay for a transition house to be for women only and for women and their kids, right? And you know, the city took away this grant that they've been getting for some time because they don't go along with this idea that a man can just self-identify as a woman and walk into their transition house.
It is. It's all very weird. I mean, it's one of those things that you've brought up the word feminist a few times, but I mean, it's not even this is not a feminist issue. You know what I mean? Like, it's not. Well, I mean,
Well,
I,
it's
I
an
guess,
everyone issue. I mean, it is
yeah,
a feminist issue, but it's
yeah,
also an issue that,
yeah. That,
yeah,
that that's what I mean. Like, it's not even you need to be a feminist or part of this movement or whatever to.
or
Right.
right or left or
No,
whatever.
no, no, no. It's just. I mean, in fact, I would. I don't know. I know. Posey said this was the case, but I would imagine that you've actually got I'd imagine that the people who would be attacking you are all going to be coming from the left. I don't think you're going to have anyone who's on the right or who is traditionally conservative who is buying into this crap, because
Mm-hmm.
it's been weird. I mean, it's been funny for me, like when I did that deadlift video, and oh man, I gained like 10,000 Twitter followers in a week, and I was just seeing all the different groups that it was kind of going into. And I suddenly started getting all these people with, feminist or radical feminist or rad fem in their bio, all following me. And I was kind of like, yo, what's going on here? Like,
These
I'm
are
not,
my normal
yeah,
fans.
yeah. I was like, man, like I've said I've been pretty harsh on feminism in the past. Why am I getting all these people following me and thanking me? But would I be right in saying that there's a bit of a schism in modern day feminism, and you've got kind of different groups of feminism who have, sorry, you've got different groups of feminists who have very different ideas on this topic? It seems like you have people like yourself and several others who are entirely opposed to this whole self ID gender identification thing. Am I right in that the term is gender critical? Is that right? That's
I
the
don't use the word gender critical because
okay.
because I just think it's reality. Like I'm just
Mm,
stating actual facts. So I don't feel like there's any kind of name that I need to give that. And I
okay.
don't even, yeah, I think it's also just the arguments that I'm making are basic feminist arguments. And
Mm.
if you don't understand and support these arguments, then you're not feminist. This is my opinion. So I don't
But
use the term gender critical,
am I
but
right?
others do.
Am I right in saying that there is a faction of people who call themselves feminists, though, who are pushing for this? I mean, a lot of the people are saying, like, this whole issue, a lot of people, correctly or incorrectly, are actually blaming on feminists, right? And I think that might be like a subgroup of feminists. That's what it seems. Again, in terms of the terminology, I've heard people say you've got like liberal feminists who tend to be for this stuff and believe in these gender identity ideologies. And then you've got more what people may call radical feminists or gender critical who are opposed to it. Is that right? That's kind of what I've gathered over the last couple of weeks. It's kind of new to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, like I think that anybody who's advocating for this ideology, this gender identity ideology, isn't actually a feminist because I think that it's a really weird, regressive, sexist ideology. Like I think that the idea that like if you put on makeup or if you put on a dress, then that means you're actually a woman. I think that's a sexist idea, and I think that feminists have been pushing back against those ideas for a really long time. Like if a boy wants to play with dolls, he must be really a girl. I mean, no feminist would have made that argument 20 years ago.
Mm,
But yeah, so a lot of the people who are attacking me and the other women who are speaking out about this and who are promoting this idea do identify themselves as feminists, do identify themselves as leftist. But I think it comes out of this so I call it third wave
okay.
feminism, and third wave feminism seems to have really glommed onto this. You know, my experience is valid, and no one can challenge my experience. And if I announce my identity, everyone has to accept that identity, and it's very kind of like me. Also very much rooted in what I was talking about earlier, this postmodernism and gender studies, this idea that you can kind of subvert material reality through language or academic jargon, essentially, or by announcing, repeating these weird mantras over and over again, trans women are women, etc. But it all just seems really kind of like word salad to me. Like it all just seems so like academic and jargony. Like they all just sound like they've been writing essays at school for too long,
Yeah.
and they've forgotten what material reality is, and they've forgotten what real women's lives are like. Like I find that this third wave feminism is really not, it's really totally out of touch in terms of what real women are struggling with in the real world, and in all sorts of ways, in terms of poverty, in terms of being mothers, in terms of violence they're suffering at the hands of men, in terms of prostitution, pornography, just living their day-to-day lives. I mean,
Mm,
it's so out of touch and ridiculous, and most people in the world would have no idea what they were talking about or what any of these words mean. And then yet these are also the same people. These are a lot of like young kind of collegey students promoting this ideology,
yeah, yeah.
middle class kids, whatever. um, but that they're, yeah, that they're the ones going around accusing everyone else of being like privileged and like, oh,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't
of
get
course.
it, like you're
Of
like
course.
white feminism, you're privileged, like you don't understand marginalized communities. And it's like you're completely out of touch with what's going on in the entire world. Like it's, you only talk to like your small group of like 15 friends who have the exact same experience as you and use the
Yeah.
exact same like stupid nonsensical language that you
Yeah,
use.
it's a cult.
Totally.
it's a secular religion. I mean, it's weird because what I find really bizarre is how everyone uses the exact same words and phrases and often the same like vocal inflections. Like there's a certain way that people who have been infected by this ideology talk, and it's very predictable. It's funny because I'm quite good at parodying it. So oftentimes on Twitter, I'll kind of like adopt this position, and I'll just start throwing out these same terms, and it's again it kind of it causes a system error for these people because they don't know. It's like I think underlying, I think they know I'm like it's being satirical or it's being mocking, but like people can't even tell the difference anymore. So I could go on and write some post which is just word salad talking about my lived experience and being a marginalized trans person of color and blah, just throwing out these terms and talking about oppression and hierarchy and this privilege and that privilege. And we've kind of reached this stage where it's really difficult to tell satire from reality because I've seen some genuine blog posts or articles or things, and I'm like, wait, surely I'm there checking if it's the Onion or something. I'm like, wait, is that a real is that a real
Totally.
thing? Yeah, and you see it with
It's like satire come to life. Like it's like who could have predicted this
yeah,
ridiculousness?
like I mean, and it happens with all the different contingents of the intersectionality matrix. It happens with things to do with race, things to do with sex, things to do with sexuality. I mean, I remember reading an article last year about how milk is racist and how milk is a hateful symbol of white supremacy because and it was a legitimate
They've just run out of things to write about, right? They're like,
it was a
what's my
legitimate
hot take gonna
article.
be today?
It's a
Milk.
legitimate
Perfect.
milk. I'm just yeah. Apparently, it's because in terms of the theory behind it, it's because obviously a lot of non-white people are lactose intolerant. So right,
Oh,
so because lots of
so
people
lactose itself is racist.
exactly. So it's
No
because
more cheese for the social justice
so
warriors.
apparently it's a symbol of white supremacy because obviously one it's white and then two supposedly white people drinking it is showing their genetic superiority by the fact that they can digest, and it was a whole article. I'll have to try to like
Lord.
pull it up later on, but I was just reading this thing and I was like, you people are insane. Like whoever wrote this, I'm like, you're actually insane. Like what is wrong with you? And
Yeah, like it almost seems like a plant. Like if this were all like a right-wing conspiracy to mock progressives, like what a genius idea. Like, and I would totally buy it. I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense that that's what happened is that some like right-wing guy was like, hey guys, it would be really funny.
it might be the only way. It literally might be the only way. I mean, I'm almost like encouraging men to compete in women's sports and to go and just expose this for what it is. I mean, I think that's why what I did resonated so much because it's one thing to talk about it and to be theoretical and whatever, but the whole point is that I'm not a professional powerlifter. I'm not a professional athlete. And I just walked into the gym on a training session and I could, on any given day, can smash all these female records. And there's dudes who are way stronger than me. So the point isn't that, to try to put so again the way people interpret things is crazy, right? I had some people attacking me saying that I was mocking women by trying to show that women are weak or fear, and I was like, you've completely missed the point.
Yeah.
This is just showing the reality of the situation. I'm trying to show you why I should not be competing with women. I'm not trying to the whole thing was it's just
Yeah, it's weird. Well, and the point, it's people are so confused. I think the word equality has probably confused people and the word gender equality because it's like the point of feminism isn't to say that men and women are exactly the same and that they should be doing all the same things and that they should pretend that they're the same. It's just about, challenging ideas that are harmful and challenging legislation that's harmful and allowing women to have equal opportunities and to function freely and safely and to lead fulfilling lives.
yeah.
I did want to mention one thing that I forgot to pick up on
Yeah,
earlier
go for it.
because you said that, like when we're talking about us getting accused of like being hateful or like, not being empathetic or not being nice. Like I'm always people are always sort of trying to bully me by telling me that I'm being mean, right? They're like, well, why can't you just be nice? Like, why do you have to use the wrong pronouns? It's mean. It hurts people's feelings. Like, why do you have to make these arguments? And it's like, well, first of all, like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't think lying is nice. Like, I don't think I have to pretend that reality doesn't exist just to be nice to people. I mean, where will that take us if we all start lying to each other and denying?
It takes us exactly where we are right now, and the reason why we're having this conversation.
Right. And so
it's misguided compassion.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And so at this, I was took part in a debate last week with a trans activist about this issue about gender identity and its impact on women and women's rights. And some guy in the audience came and stood up. I don't know what men's investment is in this issue, but there's so many like guys who are just like irate about me saying that men and women are real. Like one guy stood up and he was one of those guys who's like, well, what is your definition of a woman? And I was like, well, I told you already, it's an adult human female. It's like, what does that mean? And he's so angry at me. And I'm like, dude, what? This doesn't affect you at all. Anyway, so this one guy stands up and he's like, Meghan, I'm just really not hearing a lot of empathy from you. And we should be talking about empathy and you should be more empathetic. And I was like, I don't think it's empathetic to force women to like be around a dick in a change room. Like, I don't think it's empathetic to like take a $30,000 grant away from a women's transition house. Like, talk to me about, I don't think it's empathetic for you guys all to be sending me like violent threats on the internet because I understand how the world works. Like, empathy, like it's such a weird, manipulative, creepy bullying thing. And these people are sort of so used to getting their way by doing that, by kind of gently pressuring people by being like, well, it's kind and we should be kind and these people are suffering and so you just have to go along with it. And it's like, I don't want people to suffer. Like I don't want any of these people to suffer. Like I want them to live like happy lives and to be themselves and do what they need to do. But that doesn't mean that they get to force this stuff on the rest of us, especially not if it's impacting us in these really big ways. I mean, that's not empathetic. It's such a weird reversal.
It is. Here's a question: do you find you're getting a lot of support from conservatives on this? Because I
totally.
imagine yeah. I mean, this is so good for conservatives. This whole thing is just like everyone's like, man. come over here.
Yeah, they're like, Meghan, you're with us now.
It's hilarious. It's so funny because I'm just like, it's so odd. I mean, I made like a weird prophecy at the very beginning of last year. I put out a tweet just saying something like, the next couple of years are going to be years of strange alliances. And it's really like literally since I said that, it's really started to come into play, like even with me doing this podcast and just some of the people I've connected with and all that kind of stuff. It's so many people are saying, I'm finding myself like opening my mind here, or, previously I thought this about this group and now I realize it's actually like this. And I'm kind of having all these conversations and it's really, it's really quite fascinating. I mean, I think it's good in a way because I think I don't like to, do too much of like the left right political thing, but I do think that there's just kind of like, as far as politics, I think you've kind of really got about 80% of people kind of somewhere around the center. Like I think people might lean a little bit more different ways on specific issues, but I do think like most sane thinking people are kind of like, in this kind of blob in the center. And then you've kind of got like these extreme fringes, but those extreme fringes are so loud and so vocal and so active that sometimes it seems like that's everybody. But I think what's good is that it's kind of bringing, it's not fully happening yet, but I think it's kind of bringing people together who are kind of like waking up in the middle and being like, oh, wait, okay, that person's not that bad, or, that person's not that bad or whatever. And people actually having these conversations and finding that there's common ground and, these conservatives or right wingers or whatever, like they're not all evil, as I know a lot of people who traditionally consider themselves more liberal or on the left often tend to think. Largely because they've just kind of exiled themselves from even having dialogue. But I think it's good that people are coming together and talking and just having these honest conversations. Because with a lot of these issues, there's not even a disagreement. right? People may have disagreements on other things, but with a lot of these things, it's like, this isn't even a, like I said, to me, this isn't like a big, it's a feminist issue in a way, but most people, I mean, people generally do want equal rights. People do want fairness. People don't want to see different, there's this idea that there's this like that 50% of the population wants to like oppress women or oppress gay people or oppress trans people. And it's just like, no, where are these ideas
Or
coming from? Like,
yeah,
no.
or even that people shouldn't. I mean, yeah, the left-right binary has become really frustrating to me because, like you say, like that just doesn't represent the majority of people in the world. Most people are apolitical or somewhere in the middle, or who have various views that might fit left wing, and some others might fit
Yeah.
right wing. You know, whatever you want to say. I mean, people are people, and they're so much more complicated than that. And the amount of people who really fit completely into the left and, you know, agree with every single one of these issues, and same thing on the right, it's just not representative. But this issue, I mean, yeah, like it's like, of course feminists care about this issue, but of course anybody should care about this issue, and they can see that it's wrong. You don't have to be a feminist to say, yeah, there should be transition houses for women and men shouldn't be allowed in, or yeah, like men shouldn't be allowed to compete against women in sport. And yeah, I mean, I become really frustrated lately, not just because of this issue that's been sort of percolating in my mind for some time, because I sort of got tired of just talking only to and amongst people that already agreed with me. You know, like I genuinely enjoy talking to people, and I like talking to people that I disagree with on various issues, and I like learning about different people's perspectives, and I don't like getting caught in this ideological bubble or cycle where we're all just kind of saying the same things back and forth to each other and agreeing with each other. You know, like I want my ideas to be challenged,
Mhm.
because what if they're bad ideas? You know, like I want to kind of think outside the box. And so this whole thing around this gender identity thing, and what happened to me with Twitter, and the fact that after I got kicked off Twitter, I was contacted by a lot of right-wing people, and not even, you know, just right-wing people. I mean, people who just aren't feminist and aren't left-wing, who I wouldn't have
Yeah.
spoken with otherwise, you know, libertarians, or what, I don't know what they call themselves, classical liberals, or, you know, people, a lot of people who see themselves as people who don't like feminism and don't agree with feminism and don't agree with leftist ideas. And I really enjoyed those conversations, and I really liked talking to those people. And it sort of made me realize, I'm like, you know, just because we don't agree with each other on blank, we might agree with each other on other things. And it doesn't make you like an evil person because you see the world in a different way than me, or have different perspectives. And this thing where we go around vilifying people who don't agree with us about everything is so unrealistic and unproductive.
Amen. One more time for the people in the back. So am I right in saying that you're taking legal action against Twitter? Is that still happening?
Yeah, so we filed a complaint. We haven't heard back from Twitter yet, but we filed a complaint on the basis of breach of contract, and false advertising. I mean, because Twitter sort of launched itself and really sold itself and went really hard on the idea that it was a platform for free speech. You know, Jack Dorsey has said that in public many times, that they don't make decisions around banning people for political reasons or for ideological reasons. They also said in their terms of service that they would give users 30 days notice if they changed any rules, and they didn't do that around this misgendering rule. Like they announced this rule around misgendering after I was banned from Twitter. And so, yeah, I mean, it's it's a public interest case, so it's not, you know, like I'm not going to make any money off this case or anything like that. No one's going to make any money off this case. Where we have a fundraiser going to support legal fees, because
Mhm.
the lawyers aren't going to be making a ton of money off of this either. They just think it's wrong. And yeah, I mean, it's wrong on so many levels. I mean, Twitter is the public square now, and Twitter has an enormous impact on politics and elections, and we know
Oh yeah.
that, and Twitter knows that. And they're creating a false reality, you know, like by cutting people out, they're making it appear as though a majority of people agree with certain ideas that a majority of people don't. Whether those are progressive ideas, it's not just around this gender identity ideology too; it's other issues. But they're shaping reality, and it's creepy, and they're imposing this kind of 1984 style newspeak on people and punishing people who don't go along with it. And I think it convinces people that, this is the new reality and this is the new normal and this is just what everyone is doing and this is what everyone believes. And if you don't believe this, you're bad or there's something wrong with you or you're not open-minded. And so I think it's quite dangerous on a lot of levels, beyond the fact that it was extremely punitive to me in terms of, my ability to work and write and publish and make a living and continue to do what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, oftentimes people say Twitter is not real life, and that is true. However, I think that Twitter and social media in general are they're a pretty good early warning system. So if certain ideas and or movements or whatever start gaining a lot of traction online, it's normally kind of a 6 to 18 month window until they will start, coming to the fore in the workplace or in academia, in people's daily lives. Those ideas do trickle in. I mean, I was filling out an online form this morning, and it asked me what my gender was, and there were like 15 different options, and I had to like look for male. I had to like find it, and
Well,
then
they've
even
taken male and female off some forms even. Like I remember going to like a massage therapy appointment and
yeah,
there was no male and female. It says like, what's your gender? And I was like, no, sex,
okay.
not gender, sex.
Yeah, to me they're synonyms, and I'm sticking by that one. But
Okay.
yeah, on this form there was yeah, there were actually three separate questions. One of them was, what gender do you identify as? One of them was, is your current gender the one that you were assigned at birth? Which is interesting language, right?
Ugh.
No, right? Like what I was assigned at birth. And then there was a third one as well, and I was just like, why are there three questions asking me like if I'm a bloke? Like it's just weird. I mean, and again, this is not based in this isn't like hatred or whatever. That it's just like, why is this a thing? Or like, to me, I'm almost like, what percentage of people are going to fill in, like, you've got 15 different options besides these two, how many other people are going to be it's all just
Yeah, like how many people are going to relate to all this? And like this language around like what gender were you assigned at birth? It's like that doesn't happen. Like sex is
yeah.
observed at
that
birth.
was,
Like you can tell. Like no one's like, I'm
yeah,
gonna go with like
yeah, that was the thing.
wear the dress.
Yeah, the language was really funny to me. I was like, assigned at birth. I was like, that's interesting. So it's not that I just was that thing. It's not like the doctor just looked and saw that I had a penis and testicles. It was that, some person just some fairy that, they flipped a coin and they were like, all right, this one's gonna be a boy.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
forced that on you, and you just had to kind of go with it no matter what.
Yeah, well, I'm starting to free myself from it, so it's
That's
wonderful. So,
nice.
cool. So, moving on from this issue a little bit, Megan. So, in terms of so I want you to educate me a little bit, because I'm someone who doesn't necessarily think that in the modern day, I'm not convinced that feminism necessarily needs to exist, which is why a reason why I don't call myself one. It's a few reasons, but that's one of them. So, in terms of the issues that you consider, I guess, real feminist issues in the modern day era, especially in the Western world. On a global scale, different question. But say in the UK, in the USA, Canada, Western Europe, anywhere like that, what do you think is the case for feminism, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's still a huge problem with domestic abuse. So I think that male violence against women in the home is still an enormous issue. I mean, women are getting beat up and killed by their male partners a lot, all around the world, but also in North America and the UK.
Sorry, so
Um,
quick interjection. I've heard that actually the highest rates of I might be pulling this out my butt, but I don't think so. I've heard that the highest rates of domestic violence are actually in lesbian couples. So ones involving two women. That's what
I've never heard that before.
yeah, I've heard that that's the high, in terms of, obviously there's far more heterosexual relationships than there are, but I've heard that the actual incident rate is higher amongst those couples.
Mm,
I might need to Google
that
that.
would
But
surprise me.
yeah, I'll
Um,
Google it. But that's
okay.
something I've heard from a couple of sources, but I've never looked up what the true source of that is, which I something I just found interesting because yeah, I was surprised by it.
Yeah, and then I mean, there's also the issue for me. I focused really heavily, as I mentioned before, on the issue of prostitution and pornography. So
Okay.
in prostitution, obviously, the vast majority of buyers are men, and the
Hmm.
vast majority of people who are prostituted are women. And that's an industry where there is like a ton of really horrific abuse and exploitation that happens. Most women and girls, so many girls are in prostitution. Um, and most of those women and girls don't want to be there, and they're there because they have to survive, and it's a quite traumatic experience for them, where
Hmm.
they're subjected to various forms of abuse, verbal, physical, sexual, etc. And that to me seems like a really obvious way to demonstrate that there still is a power imbalance, and there still is a great deal of inequality when women are forced to have sex with and perform sexual acts
Mm.
for men that they don't want to be with. And
Are,
those
but
men
yeah,
are okay with it. Like I'm
yeah.
troubled by the idea that a man would want to have sex with a woman who doesn't want to have sex with him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
so am I. Again, I think that's interesting because that's quite a conservative idea. There's a lot of people on the more liberal side of things who are very pro sex worker or pro pornography. I don't know what they call it, sex positive, or all these kind of ideas. And it's weird to me, like the whole. I don't get it. Right? I've never been a lefty, but there's a lot of stuff I kind of see there that confuses me because I completely get what you're saying, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm not a big fan of. I don't think pornography and prostitution are wonderful things for society. I'm quite libertarian minded in the fact that I don't necessarily think that. I think if consenting adults want to do that, I think it's a bad idea. I don't necessarily think it's moral. It's not something I would want to support or promote in any way. But I'm kind of like, okay, like laissez faire. But I find a lot of people who are very cool with it or who want to normalize it as kind of, there's people who consider all that kind of stuff progressive. Um, so I don't know what the kind of, I don't
yeah,
know
I
how
mean,
those things kind of add up to me. It's kind of strange.
it's weird and frustrating because I feel like the left sort of gave up on ethics in terms of those issues, in terms of the sex industry. It's like this idea that, I mean, I disagree with the idea that, if people want to do that, let them do that. It doesn't impact anyone else, because I do
Mm.
think that we live in a society, and we need to think about other people, and we need to think about how our behaviors and choices impact other people. And I think that
Welcome to the show, conservative Meghan Murphy.
I've invited member of the religious right,
Yeah,
Meghan
I
Murphy.
know, it's brilliant.
These are feminist arguments, though. Like, I don't think that these ideas around ethics should be reserved by the right. I think that the left should care about sexual ethics and should be thinking about, like, what is pornography, what does pornography do to you when you watch pornography, and this is how you're engaging with sex and sexuality. Like, I think pornography has a really big impact on your brain and how you have sex and how you see women and probably how you see yourself as a man.
It does.
um
It does.
it definitely shapes. I feel like it's shaped our sexuality as a society, because like practices become, and imagery becomes mainstreamed,
Yeah.
that I don't think is positive imagery, especially for women, and I don't think is a positive way to engage with sex and sexuality, especially when we're talking about things like violence and humiliation and degradation and these like really misogynist words and misogynist and racist imagery. Like, it's not nice to sexualize humiliation. Like, so much of what's happening in pornography has to do with humiliating people and degrading people
Cucking.
and hurting people.
Cucking. And there's a big like incest sort of trend as well, which is
Totally.
pretty bizarre. Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, pornography certainly. rewires people's brains. I mean, they've done studies on that, and yeah, it's a real thing, and
Like it's
it is addictive for people because people will continually, someone who's titillated by something that's quite mild to begin with, if they kind of go down that rabbit hole, then they get desensitized. It rewires your brain, so you need a it's like smoking cigarettes or doing a drug or something. People need a bigger hit, a bigger hit, bigger hit, and next thing they know, they're looking up the most extreme, bizarre, degrading, humiliating, weird stuff.
yeah.
And yeah, I do. I'm certainly a believer that, kind of what you were saying, just in terms of the wider society and ethics and morality. I do think that certainly the Western world has gone off the rails on that. To be honest, not everybody, but I do think that there are a lot of things that are going too far. Again, when I talk about this stuff, people, oh, Zuby, you're so conservative, you're so and it's like, well, certain traditions and certain ethics and belief systems and standards, basically, they've historically existed for a reason. And, certainly those can go too far. I'm not saying you want everyone living in some, in some super restricted. I mean, I grew up in Saudi Arabia, so I know the opposite. So I've kind of seen both sides, but there's a lot of stuff there that, I mean, it was a really interesting place to grow up because it's extremely different in a lot of ways. And there's certainly less freedom and liberty and whatnot in the Western sense. But in terms of sort of ethics and morality and people being on the same page, it's actually a lot better there in many ways. And you don't get a lot of the problems that you have here as a result. You don't get a lot of these societal problems. There's no drug problem there. There's no drinking problem. There's no problem of, you know, people having tons of children out of wedlock and broken families and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, yeah, it is strict, and there's a certain things there that I'm not personally a fan of, and I wouldn't advocate for. But I think you can kind of find a happy balance where people have freedom, people have liberty, but you still do have kind of a general moral or ethical code or fabric that people agree with. And you do have some degree of shaming. Like you've got this idea of trying to remove the stigma from everything and remove the shame from everything, but it's like, no,
Yeah.
shame is actually kind of
That's a
important.
funny one, yeah. Because
Yeah, like
I don't think shame is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the Saudi Arabia thing, I don't think that those kinds of restrictions and the way that women are treated in Saudi
no,
Arabia
no,
are
no,
good
no.
trade off. But
No,
like,
no. It's
but yeah,
it's an extreme. It's an
like
extreme, but
the thing where it's like the idea of shaming and judgment has become a bad thing, and it's like, oh, so everything you do is fine and you should
it's the
never,
thing.
like, if I behave badly, like I should feel bad about it. Like
Mm,
if I'm like shitty to somebody, or if I do something wrong, like why should I not feel ashamed about that? Like I should. And the idea that I should just accept it and just be like, oh well, like that's who I am. It's like, no, you should feel bad and you should apologize and you should try not to do that again.
mm,
It's not that I want, people to go around feeling ashamed all the time and feel guilty all the time. But I want people to, reflect on their behavior and try to do better and should try to do good. And yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like we've sort of, again, I'm gonna end up sounding like super conservative when I say this. There's like
okay.
certain like trigger words that have just been like owned by the right and the left hates them, but like whatever. Like I feel like we've sort of developed this like really hedonistic culture where it's like, oh, well, you should just be able to do whatever you want to do and everyone else should accept that. And yeah, and if you're criticizing it, it's because you're judgmental and you're not open-minded or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I mean, we talked about pornography and same thing with prostitution. It's like this isn't good for your relationships with other people. I mean, it's not good for men's relationships with women. It's not good for women. It's not good for their sex lives. It's like, are you trying to cultivate good relationships? I mean, what else really matters more in the world than your relationships with the people around you, like your
Yeah.
family and your friends and your community? And this just doesn't encourage ethical or humane treatment. It doesn't encourage empathy. I mean, for these people who claim to care so much about empathy, I mean, pornography and prostitution are some of the least empathetic areas that I can imagine in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's purely transactional, and it's just giving into completely giving into the most basal human male desires, to be frank with you. I mean, I'm a guy, I've always been a guy. So I know how
Contrary to
men,
Twitter.
yeah, I know how men operate. I know what the mind of a teenage boy, what the mind of a young heterosexual male is like, right? And we are, there's a, I think the sexual pursuit zone in a man's brain is triple the size as it is in a woman's brain. That's an interesting difference. And obviously you've got all this, you jacked up on testosterone, and it's like, you know what, you do need society to keep certain behaviors in check, right? You don't want you we're human beings. We Okay, yes, we are animals, but we're not we're not animals like other animals are. Right? We don't just run around, and you don't want to just have guys running around humping everything that they find attractive and just behaving like
Right.
dogs, just jumping on things. And there's no structure, there's no fabric, there's no, people just do whatever they want. You can drink as much as you want and eat as much as you want and just you know sit and watch loads of porn and hook up with prostitutes, and just, it's like, no, like,
Yeah, we have too much
society's,
access to stuff. But
yeah.
yeah, it's this idea that, yeah, you should just, I mean, as humans, like, we are animals, but we also, as humans, have the ability to make choices and to make intelligent and ethical choices and to think about how our behaviors and what we do impacts other people. So it's really, yeah, it's frustrating to me when people say, oh, well, it's natural for men to feel these things and want these things. And it's like, I'm not talking even about what you want. Like, I think that I might challenge men who say that they want to violate women or to behave in abusive ways. But at the end of the day, you can make a decision about like an instinct or a feeling versus what you actually do in real life. I mean,
Mm.
and for people to not draw a line around that is weird to me.
Yeah, well, I think that's where the moral fabric becomes very, very important. I mean, I don't know what your personal thoughts on religion are, but I mean, I'm a Christian myself, but I think that people have tons and tons of criticisms of religion, and some of them are valid, and some very bad things have been done in the name of religion and continue to be done so. But to me, one of the very core values of it that I'm always sort of trying to explain to people who are deeply critical is, there are lots of things. One of them is obviously community, but one is just, it's the moral framework and having some sort of hierarchy of values to aspire to. Because if you just have complete subjective morality and everyone is kind of just free to completely make up their own version of the rules, then it becomes quite easy to, what's the word? It becomes quite easy to rationalize anything. So I can just
Mhm.
behave in any way. I can just let these animalistic instincts take over. I can harm people. I can take from people. I can steal from people or whatever. And I can see like, well, I don't think it's wrong, right? According to me, this stuff is fine. Like I can just do whatever furthers me. I'm not saying everyone would necessarily behave like this, but we've been spending a lot of time talking about people losing track of reality. So I think people are extremely suggestive. And if you don't have some kind of framework, I'm not even saying it needs to be necessarily believing in a deity or anything supernatural, but you do need, especially in a society, if you've got hundreds, thousands, millions of people, you need some kind of framework that everybody is operating anything. Otherwise, I do think you can, over time, just descend very much into an anything goes, and where shaming is completely bad. And it's like, okay, someone can be behaving terribly, and it's like, no, you can't even shame them because then you're being judgmental or you're being unfair or whatever. And it's worse to shame them than what they're actually doing. And
Mhm.
you do see this in different things, and some of them it's not so super serious. I mean, I think quite a good example, something a little bit more perhaps lighthearted, but perhaps not, is like the whole idea of like fat acceptance, right? So rather than, I'm not saying that people should be bullied or harassed for being overweight or whatever, but you're quickly reaching the stage where people are just like, oh no, like being morbidly obese is, yeah, no, it's fine, right? That's society's just projected these things, right? There's nothing wrong with me that I'm 200 pounds overweight. Like it's just society has enforced this, or these people are being bullying, or they're being shaming, or whatever. And it's like, no, like there are, there's just certain standards and personal responsibilities that people need to take. And if you don't take that personal responsibility and you're just trying to blame everything on everyone else all the time, then yeah, I just think stuff falls apart.
Yeah, I mean that's not an issue that I'm like a super expert in, and people do have kind of genetic issues in terms of how much weight they gain and how thin they are, and then there's also this societal thing where like we expect and like women especially to be super thin, and are really critical and shaming of women who don't fit these ideals.
I think that
But
mostly comes from other women, though, doesn't it? Like the average guy doesn't need
well, why would a woman care how
templeton.
thin another woman is? I mean, for what? Like,
Competition. I mean, no,
well,
competition.
they're doing it because they want to be seen as attractive and
Yeah,
sexual.
I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that most guys, like, there's a certain range.
I'm not saying that women don't
Yeah,
participate in that shaming at all. I
yeah.
mean, men do it too.
Oh,
I've
sure.
heard
No.
men say horrible things about women's
Oh,
bodies.
absolutely, absolutely. I would I'd be surprised if the majority comes from men, though. I think that a lot. I think that a lot of the
Well, men can kind of set the standards and then let women take on the shaming, I guess.
Maybe.
Like
I
I
mean,
think that's sort of what's happened a
it's
bit.
certainly. I mean, it's a two-way thing. There are standards. There are things that men like in women generally, and are physically just biologically wired to be attracted to.
Sure, but those
And
things
vice versa.
change over time and in different cultures, right? Like we can see that beauty standards are different in different places and in different historical moments and stuff like that.
Yes, but the basics don't actually change.
The basics don't change, but then if you look at the kind of the female bodies that are viewed as attractive in Western culture, it's not the same kind of body that's been viewed as attractive in other periods of times.
It's actually primarily sorry, I was sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
It's primarily actually the hip waist ratio. So they've shown that across cultures and across time, it's actually the ratio that stays the same. So that's why you could have say a slim woman or a thin woman who guys find very attractive just across the board, or you could also have curvier, bigger woman who guys find attractive all across the board. Of course, if someone gains like a ton of weight, then those ratios and proportions go out of whack, and most guys will not necessarily be attracted to that. I mean, it's the same with men. You've got the waist and shoulder, the waist shoulder ratio, that kind of like V taper shape thing that they've shown most women find very attractive. So I mean,
we like broad shoulders. What can we do?
yeah, exactly. But that's why it's biological. It's fine. Like I'm
not saying that there aren't things that people are attracted to that they can't help, that are just like evolutionary, like part of like biology and evolution or whatever. I'm just saying that there are certain standards that have changed, and certain looks that have changed, and certain ways of looking that are promoted in the beauty industry and pop culture and pornography.
I agree with you. I think that I have a general belief that I think that women are, I think when it comes to like physical looks, I think women put, like I said, I do think women put the majority of pressure on themselves, as in women on other women. I think maybe people think that guys are this is going to come out wrong, but maybe women think guys are more picky than we actually are when it comes to like physical.
No, I know you're not picky. I know. You don't have to tell me. I know you just don't care. Like, sure. I know. It's insulting. I have these arguments with the man in my life.
Okay. Yeah, like everyone's like, oh, like the girls need to be like this. I'm like, no, I'm kind of like, not really. Like, I mean, if you're like, if you're like 30, 40, 50, 100 pounds overweight, then okay, that's gonna hurt your chances with guys. But if it's like 5 pounds, 10 pounds, maybe 15, like guys are like,
I know that it's not hard to get men interested. I mean, I do have a really good personality.
Oh yeah.
So that helps.
That's all it is, huh?
She seems smart and funny. Um,
Well,
but
it's the first thing we
I
see.
think like what was I gonna say? I totally got distracted there. I mean I think that women like things like for example wearing high heels. Like I don't think that women wear high heels for other women. I think that they wear high heels because they think that men will find them sexy if they're wearing high heels. I don't think that women wear makeup for other women. I think that they do that so that primarily, you know, like men view them as attractive and things like that.
Yeah,
I
you're right. I think they're both true. I think it's like game theory. You know, this I don't. It's kind of like the picker bigger weapon thing. So I think because
don't know much
right.
about game theory.
Okay, well, it's kind of the idea that so if I don't know, say you've got let's take a small microcosm. Say you're in a nightclub or something, okay? If you've got a girl in there who is wearing heels and makeup, then that kind of sets the bar for all the other girls.
Mm,
So in theory, if you had a society where no woman wore any makeup, then the bar would be, I don't want to even say the bar would be lowered, but like the reality of what women actually kind of look like would just be, it would just be completely normalized. But as soon as one woman or one group of women starts wearing makeup and heels, then it means the other ones will, it means all the other women will want to do the same to compete, if you kind of see what I mean. So it's like
yeah, no, I mean, I
they're both
actually
kind of
agree
true.
with you because I
Yeah.
feel like these are some of the arguments that I make against cosmetic surgery, for example, because it's like, well, it's not just about you. Like, if you get breast implants or like butt implants or whatever, you're setting higher standards for other women that they then feel like they have to live up to. And I
Yeah.
think that, so I think that getting cosmetic surgery is not just a personal choice. I mean, it is a
Mm.
personal choice, and I don't think cosmetic surgery is really going to make people feel happier or better about themselves anyway. And there's research that shows that.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's selfish and harmful to make those, or I think that you should think about the larger consequences of
Mm.
those kinds of choices also.
Yeah. I mean, another good example of game theory, for example, would be like steroid use in sports. So if you're a professional sprinter or you're a professional bodybuilder or say bodybuilding, right? It's like if you've got a bodybuilding competition and 50 guys are competing and one guy takes steroids, then everybody else either has to or is
Mm-hmm.
going to lose. You see what I mean? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like as soon as that person does it, then give it 5 years, and now all of these guys, like all of these guys, are now on steroids because you now can't even compete with them unless you're going to go through the same thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's similar with what you said with like cosmetic surgery and whatever, right? If you're just getting women, or I've seen guys do weird cosmetic surgeries as well, but if you're going to have women inflating their boobs and doing this with their lips and doing this with their hips and their butts and all that kind of stuff, and if half of the women start doing that, then the other half are going to be like, gosh, well, like, do I do the same to, so
Yeah, it's like,
the pressures are weird. I would agree that, yeah, the root of it is wanting to be attractive to the opposite sex. But then I think these sort of other psychological factors come into play, and it becomes kind of like it's kind of like, it's just a competition, really. It becomes a lot more competitive, and the bar gets set sometimes at a standard that's not necessarily, I mean, in bad cases, a standard which is not even naturally achievable, right? So if the standard becomes something that you can't even do without surgery, then yeah, I agree with you that that's kind of silly.
well, and even I mean, I've made these arguments in terms of like porn culture also, and saying like, when women are going around saying like, oh, I love this, like I'm not gonna get into super graphic descriptions of like porn acts, but it's
Mm,
like, when they're telling men that they're enjoying something that they don't really enjoy or that's painful and degrading, then those men are gonna go on to their next girlfriend or their next sexual partner and be like, oh, well, she liked it. Like, why don't you like it? What's wrong with you? Like, women like this, so you should like it too. And if you don't, you're like a prude or you're not sexually liberated or whatever. So I feel like that's another way of being really irresponsible. And it's like, you don't just go along with this just because you want this dude to like you, because this has an impact on his behavior and how he's going to behave towards other women and the kind of pressures that are going to be put on other women as a result. Like I don't want to let men off the hook too. I mean, men have to, don't lie to yourself. Like you think all women love like anal sex, like give me a break. Like so,
they don't
like don't like just because you see this in porn, like that this isn't real, right? Like so they also like have a choice too to be like ethical.
So I've just got like
I've
just got an image in my head now, and I'm just
sorry. I was trying to like choose like one of the least bad things that I could have said too.
Yeah, that's just
so
like
normalized now because of
standard now.
Right?
Yeah.
It totally like it's changed the standards, but also when women go around saying, yeah, like I love it, like whatever it is, then I think that's it's selfish and that's harmful, and yeah, like I said, you're setting standards and expectations on other women by going along with this and by supporting it. I mean, so I think you're right. I mean, it's not just men that have a role to play in all of this. It's women also in terms of the standards that they're sort of reinforcing and the messaging and the imagery that they're reinforcing and things like that.
And in a way, I would actually say that it's arguably more important for women to acknowledge that and modify their behavior, because ultimately women are the gatekeepers to sex, ultimately.
Well,
right? well
there's rape. So.
No, generally, I'm not talking about a man forcing himself on a woman, of course not. But generally, like if guys had their way, then guys would just just be running around like.
But we also we have to have sex with men, or we feel like we have to have sex with men in order to get into relationships. I'm not saying that women don't like sex. I mean, when I have sex of my own free will, but I mean, like I just in terms of when you say women are the gatekeepers to sex, I mean, we just talked about all these pressures that are on women to perform in certain ways, and so young women especially, I think, really get caught up in that, and that feeling like they have to perform and that they have to do all these things to get men to like them and to get men to date them or be in relationships with them or keep coming back or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's really funny. I mean, I think this is one reason. As I get older, I become I think I get more conservative as I get older, because
I feel like that's happening to me too. Don't tell the internet though.
No, because a lot of the what you could call old school traditions and ways of doing things, like I think when you're young and you're questioning things or whatever, a lot of it can seem a little bit archaic, or like why is there that rule, or why is there that rule? And there's a lot of wisdom in those past several thousand years. I think that a lot of times we're trying to completely reinvent stuff that our ancestors never did, and it's like maybe there's a reason behind. Maybe there's a reason they said men and women should get married and have sex within that. But it's like, I don't know. I just think the thing with over liberalization is it creates new problems, right? You don't want to be so restricted that people can't do anything or don't have any autonomy or whatever. But when you go too far with it, it introduces a whole host of brand new problems, which if you did actually have the I mean, one example I like to use is look at I know quite a lot of Mormons, right? If you kind of
I don't know if I know any Mormons.
Okay, well, I mean, if you look at the Mormon,
I'm not religious, and I've always been an atheist, and I didn't even know any religious people until sort of like my adult life. So
that's interesting. Yeah, but with them, it's like a lot of people laugh at how ultra conservative they are, but it's like their society is booming. You know what I mean? Like they're just doing so well, right? They're just traditional. They get married young. Girls will normally be married between 19 and 23. Guys will be a bit.
But it's like awful though. Like if I'd been married when I was like 19 or 20, I would be married to I was the man that I was in a relationship with when I was like 19 or 20. Like we had nothing in common. Like
well, the thing is, well, I mean, they just take the whole thing really seriously. So I'm not even saying that you have to go to that extreme, but it's like I look at that and I'm like, I respect that because it works, right? You kind of look at the opposite and you're seeing all these problems, all these, broken families, fatherless homes, single mother. You've got a whole host of problems over there, and then you're trying to use the government or whatever and welfare to try to fix the issue, and then you're kind of looking on the other side, and it's just like, oh wow, okay, they're there, their
I mean,
population is growing, they don't have STDs, there's no kids out of wedlock. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, it might be a little too closed for some people, but it's like I can certainly appreciate um the way it operates.
I think there's probably problems on both ends. I mean, there's a lot of problems in marriage. There's, like I
Oh yeah,
said,
of course.
there's domestic abuse, and people are horrible to each other, and people end up feeling repressed. Like particularly women have felt really like stifled and repressed in marriages throughout history. And I'm not saying, like
Men do
I'm
too.
okay, so then men do too. So there's there's bad things that are happening to lots of different
Of
people.
course.
But I mean, I mean, and I'm not against, like, I want to be in a long-term monogamous partnership. Like, I'm heterosexual. Like, that's the kind of, I'm not interested in dating a bunch of people or sleeping around with a bunch of people. And I don't know that that necessarily has to happen within the institution of marriage. I think those kinds of partnerships can happen without signing papers.
Mhm.
And that would be based on ethics, right? That would be based on like building solid foundations and trusts, and building good relationships with other people, that because it's meaningful. Um, but yeah, I guess, I mean, and this also comes from my own personal experience, but I think this happens to a lot of women, is that when you're younger, you feel like you're supposed to, I guess, it's often framed, I mean, this is this new version of feminism, I think, this third wave feminism, where it's like you're supposed to act like men.
Mm,
And the way to be sexually liberated as a young woman
mm.
is to be really, really into sex and hooking up and sleeping around and performing all these like pornographic sex acts and things like that. And it's all kind of just a bunch of fakery. And it just means that like young women don't have good sex, and they don't even know what they want, and they don't even know who they are because they're too busy performing and trying to fit into these certain standards. And then it's not until you get older where you're sort of like, oh, I don't want that. Like that wasn't empowering. Was
Yeah.
told that this would be sexually liberating and that I would feel powerful. And sometimes you do feel powerful because obviously, if men are attracted to you and going after you and wanting you, you do kind of feel powerful, but it's such like a superficial, temporary version of power that doesn't really do anything for your self-esteem in the long run, or in terms of your status and power in society in general. So,
Yeah.
I mean, as much as clearly we probably have different views around things like religion and marriage and family and things like that, but I agree with you that it's like forcing ourselves to fit this kind of male model of sexuality, as I would
Yeah.
call
I
it, and
mean,
this pornographic version of sexuality where we're supposed to be like sleeping around all the time, and that we're kind of like prudish and old fashioned and regressive if we just want to be in like a regular partnership with just one person and
yeah.
that kind of thing.
I think a big mistake and a big lie that I think modern feminism has kind of like sold to probably an entire generation of women is, I think people kind of looked at the past and looked at the way men behave or were behaving in certain areas. And it was a bit like, okay, there's a section of men who act like pigs, basically.
Hmm.
And rather than curbing or checking that behavior, it was kind of like, oh, okay, like, let's just get women to act the same way men do, or not even all men, right? Let's just get them to act the same way these men do. And
Yeah.
I think that was kind of I think that was a big mistake. So it's like, because that's not it's funny when I hear terms like empowering used to describe this stuff, because it's not, it's again, I mean, from a libertarian standpoint, right? People can do what they wish, but for a woman, I mean, if a girl is, I mean, just being realistic, right? If a girl is remotely decent looking, it's not hard to find a male sexual partner. Guys are horny, man. you know, like right, it's
I
not
mean,
it's
yeah,
not like it's not even like it's a challenge or something.
totally.
It's like, yeah, guys will
I mean, the question is who you end up with as a sexual partner.
egg,
It's like,
egg,
yeah,
egg.
you can find anyone. Like, and it's not going to be hard for me to find somebody who wants to date me
No,
or
but
hook up
I
with me or
think
whatever. It's more likely that I'm just not going to like them.
yeah, I mean, also, I think the bar for women. I mean, this is coming very much from my male perspective and knowing what goes on in my brain and how I operate. The standard is really like what kind of man will commit to you, right? It's not just like who will sleep with you. It's like, look, guys will, right? Guys will, like, a single guy will sleep with a whole bunch of girls. Will he commit to all of them? No. So it's like,
Mm,
okay, it's not the empowerment idea and the sort of value and whatever. It's really should be more about the commitment and, you know, actually having some kind of decent relationship.
accountability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
having
Like
a relationship. There's nothing empowering. There's
being
nothing.
accountable, treating the other person with respect, like
Yeah, there's not.
things
There's
like
not.
that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's nothing. There's nothing amazing or impressive about a hot girl being able to sleep with a bunch of. It's like, yeah, of course you can. Like, guys will be like 9 out of 10. 10 out of 10 guys, assuming they're single and whatever, like, yeah, of course. If it's on offer, like, yeah, of course they would.
Yeah.
So it's like there's
Well, and the
nothing.
unfortunate reality is that for men and women, I mean, I don't want to apply this to everyone because I'm sure there are women in the world who like sleeping around and maybe enjoy that or are sexually fulfilled by that. But I think for the most part, it's easier, I know for the most part, it's easier for a man to have a sexually fulfilling, i.e., like get off just through hooking up, just through a hookup. So it's like, you know,
Yeah.
like men can have sex with somebody that they don't know that they just met that night, and it'll be enjoyable and they'll get off. Whereas a woman probably
Yeah.
isn't going to. Like for most women, it takes more than that, and it takes. This sounds like such an old-fashioned regressive argument. So
It's okay.
but I don't know how else to frame it because I think it's true, and it, you know, it's true in my experience, and it's true in the experience of most women that I know. It's like there has to be, you have to kind of know each other first of all, because you want to like get to know the other person and what they want and what they like, but also to trust that person to have a relationship. Like it's just, women don't get off as easily in sexual encounters with men as the other way around. So in terms of just sex, not even talking about everything else, it sort of does end up being more valuable for women to be in a relationship versus to
Yeah.
just be flitting around
And
and
also,
having
I mean,
hookups with these guys who don't care about them and have no investment
yeah.
in them and aren't
And and
accountable.
and also, just for, again, from a pure biological perspective, is that, you know, sex has a bigger risk for women, to
Yeah,
put it simply,
totally.
right? Like, you know, guys don't get pregnant. You know, a guy in theory could run around and sleep
Another
with,
biological reality.
exactly, you know, a guy could run around and sleep with 200 different women, and, you know, biologically that takes no potential toll on him whatsoever, right? Like, you know, if they get him on the hook for child support or something, then, you know, it'll hit his wallet or whatever. But there's no burden, right? The way the biology works, it's like a guy could just do that. In theory, I could father 1,000 children, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you know, the burden of the risk of pregnancy, the general risk of sex is far higher for women, and that's something
Mhm.
important for people to remember. You know, of course, you've now got reliable birth control and stuff like that, but, you know, generally, it's like, you know, if something happens, if you know, and then, you know, there's the risk that's on the woman. So I just think that's something that people kind of gloss over, but I'm kind of like, well, no, hang on, that's like an important, right? That's an important,
That's a big thing. The
that's
fact
yeah,
that
that's
women
like
can
that's a,
get
that's a
pregnant, that's a
yeah,
big deal.
yeah, that's a
Like
big thing, right? It could just, for that guy, it might just be
changes your whole life.
yeah, for that guy, it might just be, you know, a three minute bit of pleasure, or, you know, whatever. But it's
Yeah.
like, no, this is actually, it's a serious thing. I'm just looking at the time, Megan. We've gone on, it's a super interesting conversation. So I've just let
Now
it.
that I've been brought over to the right wing and everyone like,
I know, mission
why do
done.
you keep saying that you're a
Mi- mi-
socialist? Like clearly you're like a rabid right winger. Like
mission accomplished. I have exposed Megan Murphy as a right-wing Christian
uh,
conservative who
I
wants
mean
to
I just
return back to the traditional family and patriarchal model. Fantastic.
ooh, perfect. I'm glad we settled that. Great. I mean, what is obviously interesting about this conversation and other conversations that I'm having with people like outside my traditional box is that and this is what I'm sort of trying to tell people and show people. It's like, you're going to find yourself agreeing with people who you don't want to agree with. I'm not saying I don't want to agree with you, but you know what I mean? Like, if you get out into the world and you talk to somebody sitting at like the bar stool next to you, you're going to find things that you have in common with that person, even if you have like wildly different politics and you have different experiences and you've had a very different life or whatever. I mean, in general, you're going to find kind of commonalities. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the fact that it's like, okay, I might share some opinions in common with people on the right or people who are libertarians or people who are conservatives. And then I also share opinions with people on the left in various ways. And I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it means that you're
And
thinking.
then we can argue about all the other stuff too,
Yeah,
of course.
no,
But yeah.
it means that you're thinking. I mean, if you align, you kind of alluded to this earlier. I think if you completely align with any one side or like political party or in political individual, to me, that's a sign that you're not really thinking. You're just, I shouldn't be able to predict all of your beliefs based on knowing one, right? If I can do that, then to me, that person's not really thinking, because there's no reason why your position on gun laws or gun control should determine your position on absolutely everything else. But for a lot of people, it does. It's like, okay, if I know that one, then I can now predict everything else, and it shouldn't really be like that, because we're individuals.
Yeah, and I would argue that those people are not being honest. Like, I would argue that those people aren't being authentic, because I think if people are really going to be honest, they're going to have some opinions that aren't politically correct. And so all these people who are claiming to have all the right opinions, the right political opinions that you're supposed to have in this day and age, I just don't buy it. Like, I think so many of those people are just being fake. And if we had more like real, authentic, honest conversations, then we would kind of find ourselves agreeing a lot more, but also, be able to get somewhere instead of just being like virtue signaling and all high and mighty on the internet.
Yeah, well, I'm working on it. That's why I called this podcast Real Talk.
Great, awesome, good work.
Awesome. So, let people know where they can find you online, Meghan. What's the best place?
Not on Twitter. So my website's feministcurrent.com. I have a public Facebook page. I have a public Instagram page. I'm on YouTube. So
what's your handle? Is it just Meghan Murphy?
On Instagram, it's Meghan Emily Murphy. On Facebook, yeah, it's just Meghan Murphy. And on YouTube, you're just gonna have to search my name, I'm afraid. I can send you some links if you want to post them. That's what I'll do. I'll send you some links, and then maybe when you post something, you can post the links. Yeah,
I'd be happy to do that.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks,
Meghan.
It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great conversation. Really good to have you on the show.
Cool. Take care.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.